Trustee Osterling.
Here.
And so for the trustees who are attending by Zoom, there are 3 questions for each trustee. Are they on yet? Okay. I will start with Trustee Chen Lao. Is she there? Oh.
If that was me, I'm here, but I can't hear you.
That's Trustee Martin.
I can.
Yeah, he's going to have to answer questions, so we have to make sure they can hear. Steve.
They can't hear.
I can hear Alton and Sandra very clearly, but I can't hear the people in the meeting.
Okay. Get that fixed.
The joys of hybrid meetings.
Yes.
Can you hear me, John?
Okay.
I can hear people on the dais, but I can't hear anyone who's not on the dais.
Oh.
Oh, okay, so you can hear us.
So, Mary, do you want to come?
Well, we can't hear Mary.
Am I not
Mary,
here?
come on over here and ask your questions.
Well, I'll start with Trustee Chen Lao with the 3. Thank you. The 3 questions are: can you hear me well?
Yes,
Were you able to hear our proceedings up until now?
yes,
And do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
yes.
Thank you. The next trustee is Trustee Martin. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you. Well might be a bit of a stretch. You gotta talk loud.
Were you able to hear our proceedings up until now?
I can hear you much clearer with that sentence. Thank you.
I think that's a yes.
Okay. Do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting? Thank you. And Trustee Wong, the 3 questions. Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes,
Were you able to hear our proceedings up until now?
yes,
And do you have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
yes.
Thank you.
I don't have a printed copy.
Oh,
Oh, we now will have the land acknowledgement. Dr. Olivo?
Thank you. Pasadena City College is a learning community within the indigenous homelands of people who have been known as the Gabrieleno Band of Mission Indians of the Xixi-Quanga Village and Quiche Nation. Tonight, we acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this land on which we gather. Let us take a moment of silence in honor of the important contributions of the stewards of this land who came before us. PCC and its faculty, staff, and students recognize that we are all simultaneously teachers, learners, and guests on these lands. This land acknowledgement is a small part of an ongoing process of working to be in good relationship with the people of the land and embodying equity in our practices and policies. Thank you.
Trustee Kwong, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, everybody stand, please. Face the flag. Let's begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any public comments on non-agenda items?
Yes, we have 2 public comments on non-agenda items, and our first speaker this afternoon will be David Nunley.
I assume that this is where I'm to speak from. First, I'd like to commend the college and you trustees on upgrading the facilities to minimize COVID spread when you pushed for in-person instruction when you did. When a group of faculty did not want to work in person while society was open thanks to widely available vaccines, you forced them to come back to work. And faculty at times misses why they are employed, is to instruct students. And instructing students remotely is not the level of instruction that society expects. Similarly, this hybrid meeting, the 3 trustees appearing by Zoom, I don't know why you're not here in person. I really don't. And I expect that everybody should be in person in an elected body meeting from here on out, unless unusual circumstances and the delays that you cause because of your communication issues, that's the biggest part of that. You miss out a lot by not being here in person. I'm also concerned with the lack of transparency with PCCC. With this bond issue, I went online trying to find a budget document. Could not find a budget document anywhere.
Mr. Nunley, if I could interrupt, if you would like, because you have a 3-minute limit, you can have 2 comments. You can have 1 comment now on the non-agenda item, which you've already done. You can continue if you'd like, or if you want to also speak during the agenda item, that would give you more time. It's your choice.
I do have a comment during the agenda item as well.
Okay.
No, because that comment is separate from the agenda item.
Okay.
So,
pardon me for interrupting. Carry on, sir.
that's fine.
Yeah.
But transparency is really, really key. And at the same time, I tried to email each and every one of you. However, your email addresses are not on your list of who you are on the website. So there should be a way to get comments directly to you. I do find it's interesting that 65% of the student population comes from outside of the district. So as a resident of the district, I'm subsidizing a lot of those out-of-district people. I'm not sure the college is really recognizing the declining enrollments in colleges, in the high school population, which is your future student body. I commend on the diversity aspects. 52% of the students are female. 51% of the population is Hispanic, but you talk about you need to increase that percentage. Well, I'm not sure you really do. And then you want to determine why so many students are Asian. They're 23%. Well, when you look at blacks, which are only 44% of the population of your student body, and whites at 15%, those levels aren't indicative of the population of the district, and both those should be increased. We moved here for diversity's sake. We love this community, and we really had to strive for the college to reflect that. And before I sit down, I did notice that one of the trustees wasn't standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. That's common courtesy for the flag, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nunley. Our next speaker is a frequent speaker and one who I enjoy your persistence and hearing your comments. But before I introduce this speaker, there has been a grievous, albeit unintentional, oversight on the part of this board, and I'm going to attempt to rectify that. And specifically, our speaker has asked to be called by their proper name and introduction. So I'm now going to introduce Miss Shaganaka, female speaker, and I am going to read the subject matter. Can you stop your illegal gender discrimination against me because I am a woman and I use female gender pronoun? So Ms. Shaganaka, our sincere apologies in the past for introducing you incorrectly. And as always, I'm looking forward to your comments.
First, the Board of Trustees who gender pronoun correctly. Thank you so much. You're the only one, and you're the one, most likely the only one. All right, good morning. So we, in the past, I heard that one of the common topic about this board is that everybody's talking about a low enrollment rate. Everybody is having a PhD degree right here, so you only talk about from a PhD education point of view. I have a high school diploma in progress, so I can tell you a little bit from a high school education point of view regarding why the enrollment is getting lower and lower. Number one is the transportation. Well, the previous speaker just said more than 60% live outside from the district. And then right now we're talking about a $6 gasoline, and right now we're talking about 15% inflation, and right now we're talking about your financial aid can never catch up to the 15% inflation, and then without any transportation assistance during the summer semester, and then, regarding, I assume majority of students cannot afford a car, cannot afford a gasoline anymore in the current pandemic. So that will, the problem number one, that will disencourage a lot of your future students continue going to school at PCC. Number one. Number two, that will be the quality of education. So in my political science class, during my presentation, I asked that who is the second president of the United States? Which president serves before Barack Obama? And then nobody can give me an answer. And then my neighbor, a 12-year-old kid, can give me the answer immediately. That's what you call it, a college-level political science classroom. And then when I asked the professor, I said, "Hey, professor, how come your lecture, your material, everything end at the Bill Clinton era?" I think the students, political science is something that needs to up to date. We need to learn about Obama, Trump, Bush, or probably the Biden. But some feels like your material it stayed 30 years old. It will never improve, never progress. I said, why? The professor said, you don't have to be in my class. There are hundreds of classes. You're welcome to drop, and you're welcome to go to another class. And then I go to the dean, and I tell the student, I said, hey, dean, our education, the lecture, the material, it has to be, up to date. Every day is a new history in the making. Every day the Congress is doing something different. And then, I talk about 25 minutes to the dean. The dean said, "Okay, sir." And I said, "Okay, sir." The dean said, "Thank you, sir." And I said, "Thank you, sir." The dean said, "Have a nice day." And I said, "Have a nice day." So that's the college class. When we go to the PCC website, we see that PCC is probably better than the Harvard University. But for me, to actually participate inside of each class, for me to witness what the professors were doing during the pandemic, before the pandemic or during the pandemic, using the same lecture rule, it's every day.
Ms.
It really feels
Shaganaka,
different.
pardon me for interrupting. Your time has expired, and we look forward to you continuing your comments at our next board meeting, which is next Wednesday.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our public comments on non-agenda items. And just for the record, we do have a number on the agenda item, and we'll get to those when that occurs.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, the next order of business is an action item. It is, so I read the resolution. So the item is a resolution ordering an election to authorize the issuance of general obligation bonds, establishing specifications of the election order, and requesting consolidation with other elections occurring on November 8th, 2022. So do we have
Or do
comments
the-
first, or open
You can do
for-
comments, and then you have a presentation. Correct.
Okay.
All right, we're going to do the public comments on this agenda item first. And so in no particular order, David Nunley, you have the stage again, sir. And I forgot to mention before you spoke, we have a 3-minute time limit, and you'll see the lights go from green to yellow to red, and we do have a number of comments. So out of respect to all of the speakers, if we could all stay within the 3-minute time limit. Thank you, and Mr. Nunley, you're up again. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm going to address each broad item as was put out in the mailers that were sent to residents of the items that you're proposing to use this $500 million of funding for. repair or replace leaky roofs, old rusty pipe, and faulty electrical systems. These are all maintenance issues, and the trustees have been properly managing the college. They should have been doing this in annual maintenance budgets. I'm not sure who's failed to keep this up. Keep computer systems and instructional technology up to date. Again, annual funding matter. Technology cost on a per instrument basis, PCs and projectors and such, they actually decreased in real dollars in the past 2 decades. Update classrooms for STEM. Some upgrades are needed, but basic math and engineering instructions, which for most 2-year programs, the study of physics and math, they haven't changed since Pascal's theorems and Newton's laws, which were fine for Einstein when he went to college over 100 years ago. Improving access for students and veterans with disabilities. The ADA was signed into law by Bush in 1990. If you've got problems with access, you've got more problems than access. Modernized classrooms, same thing with the STEM. Repair outdated electrical and irrigation. There's been plenty of funding programs over the past decades regarding water conservation and electrical, and why you haven't done it, I don't know. Improve student safety. This is one of the safest places around, safer than many places where your students live. I'm not sure why it improved. Remove hazardous materials like asbestos. Once again, asbestos has not been used as a building material since 1989. It's outlawed then. If it's in place, you leave it in place until you do construction. Lead pipes, if it's non-potable water, not a problem. Retrofit older buildings for earthquake preparedness, I concede some of that. But the survey in this study, absolutely, completely non-scientific. It was all voluntary. That statistical survey has no validation behind it. And if any one of you had done a similar survey in your PhD or master's thesis, you would have been laughed out of your committee.
Mr. Nunley, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your 3 minutes is up, sir. And again, out of respect for all the rest of the speakers, we are going to go to speaker number 2.
That's fine.
Thank you for your comments. And we're now going to go to our next speaker, who is Xiaodan Leng.
Yeah, you could just raise fees or cut your athletic programs.
Mr. Nunley, politely, sir, your time is up.
I've been teaching here since 1997, and the last measure bond was passed in 2002, 20 years ago, in March, which is $150 million. So I saw it through, step by step, how it transformed Pasadena City College. Outside, inside, for the faculty, students, and as a whole. I'm not gonna go into detail, but beside beautify the campus where we would stand on the R building watching the construction, it has brought enormous benefit to the students. We have a math resource center which only hosts maybe around table 12 students. With that, we have now the entire, half of the R building on the first floor, which, not half, maybe half, quarter. But what's good about it, there are 10 faculty that's part of the Math Success Center, and every day I walk in, I could hear loud noise, but those are joy of learning, pull the blackboard, student discussion. So that is something that's really benefit. I think that has contributed a lot of success for our math courses during the COVID with the infrastructure. Now, I participate in the design of the Math Resource Center, not like architecture, but so we knew how difficult it was and why it costs so much to redo the R building. And I hope that we do propose this measure so that we can do more, because right now, software is the equipment for the 21st century. No matter what we learn, We need to have students learn how to coding, how to write a program, how to use a program. But without a big measure, this won't be possible because it will cost enormous amount of money. And right now, our building on the first floor, it does not have internet access because the concrete filter out most of the signals. And students don't have laptops to use. We do
Ms.
have
Lam,
some, but it's not good enough.
I'm sorry, your time is up, and again, out of respect for the other speakers.
That's good.
Yeah, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Harold Zechner.
Good afternoon. My name is Harold Zechner, and I'm here to speak against a new bond measure the board is voting on. This bond measure is totally tone deaf to the reality that the average renter and homeowner is struggling to get by in this time of high inflation. They will be most impacted as they cannot shift the cost to others like large rental complexes and businesses will. In today's climate, it's no secret many must work multiple jobs just to pay the bills and keep a roof over their head. Everything, and I do mean everything, is expensive. Rising interest rates are already a death blow to many properties owners as they will no longer have the means to pay their high mortgage rates. More fees, taxes, and obligations, it's death by 1,000 cuts that every property owner must face. Every election, it's another need we property owners are forced to pay. It seems unfair that the entire burden of this measure should be paid by Pasadena property owners, especially when the majority of those that use this school will not pay 1 rent cent because many do not own property here or live in other cities. Timing is everything in this world, and it is a terrible time to raise taxes. Media reports that 40% of Americans have no savings accounts. The tax well is running dry. Hopefully, the PCC Board of Trustees will reconsider their support of this measure and introduce it once the economy improves. Just like to close and say, I had to contact my council member just to get the information, basic information about what's going on here today. You supply no information. I still don't know how long this bond goes. I still don't know so many things that should be public, even right down to how you get here to talk to you people. It's a chore. It's not being handled properly. I really hope this board reconsiders what they're trying to do here and who should pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zechner. Our next speaker is Audrey Joseph.
Good afternoon. My name is Audrey Joseph, and I am a taxpayer in the city of South Pasadena. I am also the administrative assistant in the Office of Academic Affairs, the secretary for the Association of Black Employees, and the president of the Classified Senate. I have been working here at Pasadena City College since 2014 and have been fortunate enough to work in the areas of instruction, non-credit, and student services, and therefore understand the positive impact that this bond measure would have on students, staff, faculty, and our campus as a whole. Please allow me to share some of the ways that the passing of this measure and funding source would be beneficial. It would provide collaborative learning spaces for students to study, relax, socialize, and work together, such as the Wi-Fi lounge. This would also include reestablishing a food service area that would provide students a place to eat, especially those who commute and are on campus for long periods of time. The retrofitting of old buildings to create safer infrastructures and install robust systems to notify people on campus during emergency situations, such as an emergency notification PA system or the ability to automatically lock doors if and when necessary for safety and security, would be beneficial. Upgraded classrooms to make them more adaptable and to have more aesthetically pleasing learning environments. providing our campus with updated technology, especially for our CTE and STEM programs, and also our health sciences division, so that we can stay cutting edge and competitive as an institution, especially in light of softened enrollment. Updated technology would also benefit faculty with regard to teaching and would help staff with day-to-day tasks as we conduct the business of the college. PCC is a jewel within the city of Pasadena and abroad, and such a bond measure being presented and hopefully passed will improve the value of our institution and hopefully lead to an increase in enrollment and interest within the surrounding communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Our next speaker is Carlos Tito Altamirano.
Bring this down a bit. Hello. Nice to be here again. I am Carlos Tito Altamirano. I am the interim director of OPNS, Care Next Up, and Foster Youth Programs here at the college. And I'm here today present as the past president of the Management Association. Here to say that the Management Association pledges its support for any potential bond effort. Externally, the reputation of PCC is that of a premier institution that offers the highest quality education to everyone in our community. We are a true gem in the San Gabriel Valley and in Southern California. Internally, we have an outdated infrastructure that is in desperate need of updating to keep pace with the demands of our community and the ever-evolving workforce. We need to take whatever measures are necessary to ensure that PCC remains a state and national leader in transfer, career, and technical education, equity, and student success. We cannot allow our buildings and campus to languish, or we will be left behind. Our community deserves the best possible education in the best possible facilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Altamirano. Our next speaker is Robert Gerardo. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
You'll have to restart it, Jim. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, President Chen Lao, Vice President Silver, members of the board, district staff, and the PCC community. My name is Roberto Jurado, and I am here today to express my support for PCC's bond measure on the November 2022 ballot. I am a citizen and homeowner in Altadena and part of Area 2, represented by board member Osterling. I have also been an employee at PCC since 2020. Over the last 2 years, I've become quite familiar with our beautiful campus. However, I've also become aware of the very large backlog of facilities and technology infrastructure upgrades that are needed to keep this campus running smoothly and able to meet the needs of our faculty and students. IT fiber optic cabling, roofing, and sewage lines aren't popular topics for discussion, but that critical infrastructure is the lifeline of our campus. Without the funding for proper maintenance and upgrades, it puts our campus at a risk of internet outages, classroom closures, and loss of instructional time. I urge you all to please vote in support of the November bond measure so that we can provide our students with the modern, safe, and technologically advanced classrooms that they all deserve. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jurado, and my apologies for mispronouncing your name. Our next speaker is Carol Liu.
Just a little adjustment. Good afternoon, PCC family, PCC community, and members of the board. I'd like to share a little bit about myself before we begin. I am a minority and proud of it, an immigrant and a first-generation college student, a PCC alum, a current PCC employee, and a Pasadena resident. Today, I stand before you to demonstrate my support for the proposed facilities master plan through those lenses. So similar to the PCC's education master plan that reflects the learning needs and the workforce demands of those who work, teach, start, or continue their academic journey here The facilities master plan was developed to align the physical facilities with the EMPs. So as a former PCC student who have enrolled in classes and utilized the spaces in most of the buildings on campus, I can speak to the findings that have been outlined in the plan. The C and the R buildings have the most contact hours scheduled, and their classrooms should be kept up to date. There are at least 5 divisions with courses ranging from child development, math, English, among them, that are currently utilizing those 2 buildings. The Center for Arts and the Science Village have the highest percentage of weekly lab hours. So there is a need for additional labs to meet the demands. And PCC is an open door policy, a public institution. We cannot turn students away, and we should not. Outside of the classroom, active learning and collaborative spaces would encourage a greater sense of community between staff, faculty, and students. So this also means that there's a dire need to expand student study spaces and student support services. And don't even get me started on the parking lots. Y'all, it is at near capacity. The facilities master plan is not just about improvements. It's closely tied to a sense of belonging and pride. PCC should look like a world-class campus because it is one, and it should also feel like a home. So as a family and a community of learners, we should consider whether we believe PCC will continue to thrive in its existing physical facilities, given the historical trends and projections. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Liu. That concludes our public comments on this agenda item. No further.
Thank you. And Dean?
No, Vice President Candace Jones.
Vice President Candace Jones, sorry.
That's okay.
It's okay. Good afternoon, trustees. Yes. This afternoon, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through just a summary of what brought us to this point, asking for the resolution for the election ballot. Next slide. I have my financing gurus and team here and who have been at all of our board meetings. But just to jump us into sort of the recap, next slide, please. All right, so Pasadena City College recently updated its 10-year facilities master plan, which was approved by the Board of Trustees in May of 2020. In order to address the growing facility improvements need and the technological needs, that the most common financing option for districts, both K through 14, is a general obligation bond. Voter approval is required for GO bonds, and the approval rating requirement for Prop 39 GO bonds is 55%. Back in November, so we've been working on this over a year, we gave the trustees an overview of the timeline, the tax rates. We'll briefly touch on that today, as well as then came back in both February and June to give the polling results of the community and where the sentiments were laying at both of those critical junctures. What we wanted to do is just give you a brief idea of those surveys and how they provide helpful guidance and how we wrote the bond language and what the support of our community and the support of the different tax rates. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Charles Heath. I'm a strategy and communications consultant on the bond project. So at your last meeting last month, we provided a fairly detailed presentation of the results of the tracking survey that was conducted in June. And tonight I'll just hit on a couple of the high points. So both of the, and these are statistically reliable surveys of likely voters within your district boundaries that represent the demographics and the geographic distribution of voters expected in November. We've consistently seen support comfortably above the 55% passage threshold for the bond measures. If you'll remember our presentation from last time, we started at about 64%. Support went up to 69% after we explained the projects that would be funded and some of the reasons to support the measure. And even after we simulate a well-funded opposition campaign to the bond measure, we still see support at least the 60% level. So even when we pressure test the proposal, exposing it to opposition, we feel like the support will withstand that and stay above 55%. So that's why we're confident in making the recommendation to go forward this November.
Thank you. Rachel Chen-Hui with Philman Rollab and Associates, represent the district as your financial advisor. And the slide in front of you is one of the many financial slides that I've shared with the board in the past. But just to recap and reorient everyone around this slide, I'll start with the bar chart on the top. The different color bars represent the estimated tax rate repayment required for each of the 4 issuances under this proposed bond. And then, as you can see, the maximum tax rate with all 4 series combined is at $20 per 100,000 of assessed valuation. That calculation is based on the property's assessed value and not their market value. And these tax rates are consistent with the findings from the survey, as Charles and Ms. Jones presented earlier. And you may ask, why 4 issuances? These are just preliminary analyses. It does not limit the district on how you want to implement the program, but just to give us the most educated estimate at this stage of the process. And as you can see, the numbers summarized in the table below, and each of the 4 series, how much could be generated. And just to highlight the total column, this would generate a $565 million bond, net of all the estimated costs associated with the financing. That would produce a construction proceed of just over $561 million. This is estimated to be a overall 30-year program, having a 1.66 to 1 repayment ratio. And for that specific figure, it's an estimate right now, knowing that interest rates are on the rise. The team will continue to monitor the market and recalibrate our estimates every time you go out for a issuance. Happy to answer any questions before I hand this slide to the next.
Are there any questions? No? Seeing none, please proceed.
All right, this is just sort of a brief overview of the 18-page full summary document, the resolution that was attached to the board agenda. So we wanted to make sure that we capture in different phases what the bond funding proceeds would be used for. So you'll see that we have incredible, and you heard from the community, incredible need around utilities and technology infrastructure. One of the strategies on the issuance of the COP, the Certificates of Participation, was to repay the district's $27 million obligation with some of the bond proceeds. We have intentions to build a new STEM building, as well as a new academic building and a replacement for our student services building with major retrofits of both C, R, D, and E. And some continued work on campus related to some outdoor instructional spaces to allow, again, in the new sort of modalities and thoughts around instruction, being able to pull some of those activities outside.
And what's before you currently, and in 3 places in the resolution, is the proposed 75-word ballot language that would appear before voters. It includes the legal requirements as far as the district, the amount that the voters would authorize, $565 million, the legal rates, the tax rates of 2 cents per $100 of assessed value, and also a new legislative requirement to include an estimate as to how much the district would raise annually with those estimated 4 series of bond issuances, which would be $32 million annually while the bonds are outstanding. So if this board were to approve to go in front of the voters, and if the voters were to approve at the 55% voter threshold, then the bonds wouldn't all be issued at $565 million on that day or on that month. Again, it would take some time, and there are legal requirements as to how quickly the district would be required by the IRS to spend the funds. So there's an estimate that the district would have to only issue bonds in the amount that they could reasonably expect to spend the proceeds within 3 years.
And lastly here, I think we just wanted to walk through the timeline and kind of how we got to where we are today. So the process started by assessing the basic feasibility of a bond. That was that initial polling that we conducted around the first of the year. Based on the positive findings from that survey research, we then started the process of educating and informing the community. A couple times tonight, the informational mailings, we've sent 3 to all registered voters within your district boundaries to make sure they're aware of the facility planning that's occurring here and the district's plans for a bond. So we feel we've been very transparent about those plans, along with outreach to community leaders to make sure that folks understand the rationale for why the district is considering this. Along those lines, we also utilized the survey research to build the resolution and the ballot language that's before you this afternoon. And with this step of the board considering the resolution to call for the election, this would end the district's planning and preparation process for preparing a bond measure and move us into the advocacy campaign. And as we've discussed in the past, no public resources can be used to support that advocacy process, so private resources such as the foundation and other interested parties that want to support the bond measure would take that process forward to Election Day on November 8th.
Are there any questions or comments?
Candace, why don't you call as if you see a question?
Yeah, I had a question about assuming the bond is passed here today and passed by the voters in November. How long would this process of funding and spending the funds be projected to last? How many years in the future are we looking at overall?
So it sort of depends. I'll let Ann or Rachel come back up and speak to that. So it sort of depends on when we issue and each particular series bond, but if you want to, there are different requirements.
Of course. If we go back to this slide that we show, the preliminary timing that we have assumed is assuming that this is supported by the voters in November, the soonest that the team can get the bonds issued and proceeds delivered to the college would be around February of 2023. And we have assumed bond issuances every 2 to 3 years. As Ms. Rowland mentioned earlier, there are, because these bonds issued by a public agency will be considered tax exempt, and there are tax requirements associated with expenditures of bond proceeds. Generally speaking, that's 85% to be spent within a 3-year time frame. That's why we have modeled the issuances to be this way. So if we look at the specific numbers on this slide here, Series B will be issued in 2025, then the next one 27, and the last one in 2030. And the overall repayment, if everything goes as planned as this model presented, everything will be repaid before 2052.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions?
Are there any questions from the trustees on Zoom? John?
I don't have any questions on the presentation other than compliment, as I have in the past, the administration and everyone involved in this public presentation. It was masterfully put together. I think even the recap today was kind of like the perfect Goldilocks recap of previous meetings where we have discussed this quite a bit. And I think in particular I appreciated the slide that it showed the major projects as major projects. Kind of showed the potential phasing, which we know is fluid, but to remind us that there are some very significant projects included in this measure. I do have a couple very small suggestions to the actual language of what we're going to vote on when you feel it's the right time and place to make it.
So, Trustee Martin, the language that is currently published, and since it's publicly noticed, we couldn't make changes to that without publicly noticing new changes and then going back for board approval.
Well, I think that's what I'm discussing here is not anything that will significantly change what was publicly noticed. And I don't ever remember action coming before the board that had been agendized that the board was not at liberty to make minor tweaks to, which of my suggestions are really to better articulate what this measure is doing. And as I've commented in the past, I believe we're underselling the significance of it.
So my apologies, Trustee.
What I'm talking about is extremely agendized and very minor.
We can take your suggestions. Anne, who is our bond counsel, actually, go ahead.
We can take a look at what the suggestions are, Trustee Martin, so long as we preserve the legal requirements within the language.
Yes, is that acceptable?
That's
I
fine.
have two very minor suggestions, and they're both in the addendum. One of them can be found on addendum A4. So if you turn to page A4, and you go to the fourth bullet from the bottom under the title Projects to Upgrade and Modernize Classrooms, Labs, and Career Training. And I realize that most of you are scrolling for this, so I'm going to just read it. It currently says acquire, finance, refinance, and/or entering into arrangements for the use and/or joint use of real property for existing and future classrooms, student services, and/or other uses. And my very minor suggestion to that is fourth bullet up on the bottom on page A4.
No, go up to section 4, where the bond language is. Right there, thank you.
That's not what I'm
No, we're on appendix page A4 is the reference.
Is this the resolution?
You're close right there.
There we go. Now we're on A4. Thank you.
To what? This document.
Very minor suggestion is at the very end of that, after it says and/or other uses, to simply include the 3 words, including satellite campus.
Oh, no.
Now, that in no way changes any of the resolutions or anything that's been done. It references satellite campuses other places in these documents. But I just think for purposes of clarity, and because I keep advocating that we're totally underselling what this will do, I think inserting, including satellite campuses, which is implied in what's already there, as a potential, and the fact that we are mentioning it, including satellite campuses, no way requires satellite campuses, because it says and for other uses, including satellite campuses. But I think adds clarity to the document.
We can add that language, Trustee Martin.
I have one other suggestion, and I don't mean to take any other trustees' comments here. If you want, I can go on to that. It's found on the next page, page 5. And under this, down the second section, it begins with no administrator salary, which is perfectly true. I think what this is referencing is there's no district salary that will be paid by the bond. any time. There might be some administrator at some construction company someplace that's getting a salary, and that's not what this is referencing, of course. But what it's referencing is that we won't be using this money all going to be going. So it seems to me to replace the word administrator with district salary would be a clearer presentation of what this line is saying. So those are my only two extremely minor tweaks. Again, I think both of those small suggestions are helping us not quite as undersell the tremendous benefit this bond providing, and gives better clarity to the voters that will be voting on.
Thank you, Trustee Martin. The recommendation, would be open to no district administrator salaries?
I'm open to that too.
Thank you.
That's fine. We know there won't be any faculty salaries or staff salaries either. But I think and I'm sensing you like to keep the word administrator because it has more pizzazz in supporting the bond, is my sense here. So I think, but I think it is important to at least say district administrator salaries if you're trying to keep the pizzazz for purposes of kind of total transparency and clarity.
Thank you, Trustee Martin. We could make those changes.
I have also another minor change request, and this would be on page 3, and it really is a parallel thought to what Trustee Martin has already brought up, and that is if we go to the last whereas on page 3, at the end it says, with no funds going towards administrators' salaries or pensions, and I would request the same language change there that we just made for Trustee Martin on page A5.
Thank you, Trustee Osterholm. We can make that change.
Thank you. No further change requests from me.
Student Trustee Gomez?
I just want to point out on page 3, on the under the 5th whereas, I believe it should read ensure instead of ensures that all bond proceeds are used effectively.
Thank you for that edit. We'll make that change.
And I'm also wondering if Trustee Martin's request would impact the paragraph above that, where you're allowed to reimburse district staff.
Are you on page A4, Trustee Gomez?
It was, go back to it.
I'm sorry, A5?
Yes.
And then where on page A5 are you referring to that?
The paragraph above.
The paragraph
no
above.
administrator salaries.
Okay.
It's the last 2 sentences.
Well, I'm not the attorney, so I'll let the attorney opine, but I think it already says district staff.
Yes, so
Yeah.
there was an Attorney General opinion that addressed, so a lot of these bond proposals throughout the state say that bond proceeds per the legislature may not be spent on district salaries, because folks think that, oh, we passed this bond, then the administrators will receive big pay raises. But there was an Attorney General opinion issued that stated if there were certain staff members who spent all or their majority of their time administering the bond project, hiring construction crews, monitoring the construction, and so forth. Then parts of their salaries may be used from bond proceeds, because what was happening was districts were firing their staff so that they could administer the bond program, or they were hiring outside vendors to administer the bond program, and those were more expensive.
Any other questions? Trustee Gomez?
When would the Independent Citizens Oversight Commission or Committee be
established?
expected to be implemented?
After the,
So if this board were to approve putting it on the November ballot, and if the voters were to approve, once this board certifies the election results, then the district would have 60 days to appoint a Citizens Oversight Committee.
I have a question about the Citizens Oversight Committee. Is that the procedures for appointing that committee, is it subject to board policy and what we choose to implement on how to choose that?
There are certain statutory requirements for the Citizens Oversight Committee, like there are categories of folks that are required, like a senior citizens group, a bona fide taxpayer, a student member, a member of the foundation, for example, but I think within those confines, the district board can help solicit applications for the Citizens Oversight Committee and then make the selection of such members.
And will you be around to help us and guide us and give us those regulations and standards?
Yes.
all right, if there are no other questions, I think the presentation portion is over. And I'll go back over to Trustee Silver.
Okay, I call for a motion.
A motion to approve the titled resolution.
Second?
I second, as amended by the previous comments, and I did want to make a comment during discussion before vote.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Question on the motion.
Have to do a roll call vote.
Oh.
Did the motion and the second include the spike?
The Trustee Martin, the second, which I made, did include the slight adjustments that you and I requested. The original motion did not.
Trustee Gomez, is that acceptable?
Yes.
I need to clarify that Trustee Gomez cannot be the person who makes the motion on a facilities bond measure.
So-
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not allowable, so we need an elected trustee from one
So
of the districts to do this
I'll
motion.
make the motion with the amendments previously discussed.
I'll second that.
Okay.
And I do want to make a comment during discussion before the vote. Just for the benefit of my fellow trustees, I'd like to offer a little bit of historic perspective on this. This matter actually first came before the board when I was a relatively new trustee back in 2016. And I am a fiscal conservative, and I do care greatly about my constituents and the taxes that they pay. And at the time that this came before the board in 2016, myself and other trustees did not allow this bond issue to go forward and be put on the ballot at the time. And the reason for that was several. Number one, I felt that the amount of bonds that we were requesting at that time was too much. Number two, we had not done our homework. We had a facilities master planning process that was underway, but it was only 12% complete at that point in time. And there were other reasons as well, but I think those were the most important ones. And it did not go forward at that time. And I think there were many in the campus community that felt I was the Grinch that stole Christmas and I was a Howard Jarvis anti-tax person. And I am a fiscal conservative, and I do care greatly about my constituencies and the taxes that we all pay. Fast forward today to 2022, this college staff and administration has worked very, very hard to come up with an exceptional facilities master plan, including adjustments that were made to recognize that we have neighbors that we also should care about. And that is a very well thought out master plan. And also, most, not all of this money is going to go to fix buildings that are yellow tagged and red tagged for seismic structural safety. I'm going to start with the U building, also known as the Serafian building. We were very fortunate to get a significant contribution of state money through Measure 51, which all of us trustees supported at the time. However, it does require a contribution by the college, which would come from these bond proceeds. The Serafian building, as all of us in the campus community know, was red tagged, and our wonderful science program has been conducted out of the science village, i.e. temporary trailers. And we do need to get that outstanding program back into the facility that it used to be in. We also have 4 yellow tagged buildings which we have students and faculty and employees going into, and those seismic and other upgrades desperately need to be made for safety. So the Grinch that stole Christmas back in 2016 heartily endorses this particular bond measure, and I appreciate the work of all of our staff and our outside consultants to make this something worthy that we can bring forward to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Martin. All right, roll call vote.
Trustee Chen-Lo?
I see Trustee Martin with his hand up.
Make a quick comment, because just following on Jim, Jim was the Grinch. I was the little dog that follows the Grinch around and does whatever
Max.
That was right there with him in the slate. And I totally agree with what Trustee Ostling said about the history of getting to this moment. And the other thing that I just need to point out that, and this is kind of a brief history of some of the presentations that this board has seen, and obviously some of our newer trustees had the opportunity to be there for those prior presentations. But we know the parts of our district where technology is the hardest for our students to use to assess PCC. We know the Northwest and the Southeast in particular have trouble finding, obtaining, and getting to use the technology that online classes have helped so many. We know transportation routes and distances are also hardest for the Northwest, and even probably more so for the Southeast portions of our district. And we know the geographics and the demographics of the students that we want to and need to serve the most are probably related to these same geographical areas, at least in a larger portion. And what I appreciate about this bond issue is, though it has to masterfully be worded to keep it fluid, because we don't have any real property in sight at the moment, it does give support for satellite campuses so that we can best reach the students that need it most in a way that they can physically be at the PCC campus having to rely on technology for the bus lines or some of the other difficulties that hold students back, or just make it marginally more difficult to take that one extra class that we need. So what I appreciate about this bond is that not all 585 million is slated to go into one spot, but benefit the entire district, across the entire district, and try to target where that's.
Thank you, Trustee Martin. Okay, Mary?
Trustee Chen Lao,
Yes.
Trustee Gibson,
Yes.
Trustee Kwong,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Osterling,
Yes.
Trustee Silver,
Yes.
Trustee Wong,
Yes.
Student Trustee Gomez.
Aye.
The motion
Read the
passes.
results. You read the results?
It's unanimous.
Go ahead.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you.
trustees.
Okay. There being no further business on the agenda, I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.